What's up, guys? This is Carter Thomas with Coin Mastery TV Bull Run Domination Friday edition. It's great to be back. Great to have you back. If you're new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button. One other thing that you can always do that I keep forgetting to say is if you ever want to basically support the channel, but really support the ecosystem, go get Brave browser. It's actually a smoking browser. Works really, really well. And if you go to coinmastery.com/brave, I believe you get, you can like support this channel through tokens, but you watch the browser. And if you watch these YouTube videos using this browser, it'll pay tokens to me, and I'll make 30 cents or whatever. No advertising. It's just a cool way to use the ecosystem. But I think this is the kind of thing that no matter how you feel about these guys or these tokens or whatever, the more we could use utility tokens and use products that are built on the blockchain, the better. And I think that this is a critical moment where usage is going to be a big deal. So go check this out, coinmaster.com/brave. Get your Brave browser. And if you want, when you watch this channel, fire that thing up. And I'll try to use that as much as I can. Sometimes I forget to do it just because I'm used to other browsers, but we'll keep it rocking. Now today, man, nothing's really going on. I'm just kidding. This is insane. It's like the beginning of the age of Aquarius, the dawn of a new revolution. Very exciting times. And what I want to do today, walk through a couple of the big ones, walk through obviously some of the big news, some of the bullish sentiment that's coming out right now. And honestly, I think that it's important to just kind of ride that. I think that we do spend a lot of time talking about planning for every given situation, and we'll always that's always going to be number one. But I think it's also really important to remember what this is all about, right? Keep the vision alive, because I think if you don't keep the vision alive, the momentum that we have can easily be squashed. And I think that that there is the possibility for anything to happen, including just sheer demand to overpower any sort of like technical or bearish pressure. And I'm not cavalier enough to think that this channel is going to change anything like that, but I do think that all change starts on the individual level. And if we can get a bunch of people that are staying fired up, or at least keeping the vision alive, it's a good thing. So let's take a look here. Now, yesterday we looked at this chart, and we looked at it both on the log and on the non-log functions. And I'm going to just do a log now. If some people asked, hey, how do you know which one to use, or when do you use one? And typically, the longer the time frame, you usually want to use log. A shorter time frame, it doesn't really make as much of a difference because of the way the numbers work out. The reason why I would even entertain the idea over the long term here is because lots of different analysts still use the non-long function, and it's just good to see where the prices break, because you can see where other people are looking at the charts. So for this video, we're just going to use log today, because I do think it illustrates the idea that there is still this big trend line that needs to happen. But historically, at least what I would say most traders would agree with, horizontal lines tend to be more important than anything that's diagonal. That's very loosely speaking. And so looking at previous support and resistance is usually a better gauge of where we're going to see some pushback or some momentum building. But I do think that this is the big story here, is that we've got a little bit of runway, which is great. We do have this line coming up. We've also got a couple levels, right? That 8,500 level is got a lot of historical volume behind it. But, we keep this going. Obviously, the RSIs are just out of control. But it also makes you realize, this is like a rounding error to a big investor. Someone who wants to come in and just drop the hammer, they can keep it overbought like for days at a time, and just keep pushing the price. which is why it's always good to measure your analysis. So not much is, from a strategy standpoint, right? Like what am I going to do about this next? Not a lot has changed from yesterday, or this week, I should say. Cautiously going in, having a very strict plan, not getting greedy is the key here, right? Because if this is a bull trap, meaning it just fakes us out and then starts to pull back, you don't want to be caught in that. So if you do want to make an entry, whether it be in Bitcoin or Ethereum or Litecoin or even in any of the other altcoins, that's fine, but have an exit strategy built in, at least for that whatever you buy in with. So if you buy in with $100, treat that like a trader. So say I'm buying with $100. This might not be long term. I'm gonna have $100, and if it drops 10%, I'm gonna have a stop, mentally, and I'm gonna go in and sell it or whatever it may be. But be cautious in this area because there's no promises. It's just there's a lot of good momentum. You just don't want to get sucked into that momentum. It's very easy, which we'll talk about with market cap and the sentiment shift and how fast it can shift. Okay, so overall, great stuff. Exciting times. I think the other thing, and we've mentioned this a few times, and I think that this is a really good time to bring this up. In moments like this, right, when you're seeing very, very severe growth, like very fast growth, even if you're, you bought in 14,000 or whatever, and you're down here, and you're like, oh man, I just need this to get back up to break even. It's the psychological exercise of selling into strength, even if it's like 1% of your portfolio, it will change the way you look at everything else in your portfolio. What that means is that when you sell in the strength, it means you sell into a rising market, right? Most people sell in the weakness, which means that they sell when things are going down because they're like, I gotta get out of here. But if you sell into a price that's moving up, that's often the strategy that you want to be getting used to. And so if you have not done that, let's say you have $5,000 invested in cryptocurrency, I would really encourage anybody out there to take $50 of that and go onto the exchange and sell it for fiat. Now, obviously, as always, this is not advice. This is not professional. I'm not telling you what to do or anything. I got to say this every day. You get to get it. But the psychological exercise, the freedom that it gives you, and because you realize how hard it is to actually sell the thing, it makes it real. Even if you 100% believe in crypto, you don't believe in fiat at all, you still need to be able to have the skills and the psychological, you don't want to be shackled to the idea of not being able to get out. You always want to be ready for any sort of move. So I would encourage anybody, like tiny percent, just try it, especially now as price is going up. Now, same thing on Ethereum here. We saw we're obviously seeing a huge surge, and Ethereum's just crushing it. Probably the leader of the top three. When I say top three, I mean Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, as it relates to fiat exchanges. But the same thing, if you look at the log curve here, we've still got a little bit of runway, just like in Bitcoin. If you look at the non-log, we've actually broken through this line a few different times up here, and we kind of have two different trend lines, a severe trend line on this side that we smashed a couple days ago. So Ethereum's still got some room to go. Obviously on Coinbase, that flash crash doesn't help. But the support and resistance is really the name of the game. So we still got a bit of runway. And I think that this is all very uniquely timed in that we're going into a weekend right when we may be hitting this resistance. In weekends, historically, are when some of the craziest action happens, both bullish and bearish. When you look back over the last year and a half or so, weekends are when a lot of crazy stuff can go down, which is, we're kind of teeing up for a wild time, hopefully, of continued growth. So being cautious, if you are going to buy in, but have a plan about how you're going to get out if it doesn't keep going the way you want, right? Separate from your traditional portfolio, and go from there. And that applies same with altcoins too. So if I just refresh coin market cap. Man, we are up to 327 billion market cap. So we added, like 50 billion in the last week or so. That's pretty insane. It also speaks to how ready a lot of that money was. This wasn't people that were like, oh, maybe I should get into crypto, and they go and they set up a Coinbase account and wire the money. And this was money like ready to go that was in the exchanges or like one day away from, ready to be wired into the exchanges that flooded because it happened that quickly. So this is a very interesting sign. The speed of this is very interesting in that a lot of the money hadn't left. It was just waiting for a reason to buy back in. And there's a lot of different ways you can slice that. The other one, obviously, Bitcoin dominance is dropping. And I think the big reason because of that, big reason for that is because so much money is going into these altcoins. Bitcoin is being sold or being used, exchanged for a lot of these altcoins, which is fueling some of these just massive runs. Now, as always, it's important to look at these in terms of BTC gains because that's what really matters at the end of the day. And watching which of these are in fact getting the big runs, right? Which of these coins are going the biggest, and paying attention to that and trying to understand why are they getting it? What is it? News driven? Is it community driven? Is it just hype driven? What's the thing that's pushing us forward? And so as you make any decisions, just like as you're making decisions on entries here, whatever you think that you want to buy, like I did a poll this morning, which will show you what coin do you think is going to go the biggest. If you think it's going to be, was it WonCoin, right? WonChain. Binance calls it WonCoin. WonChain is like the real thing. It's like one of the most hyped coins right now. If you think that this is going to be the biggest one ever and you want to put in $10,000 into it, in a moment like this, it's a lot better to put in $500 now, make sure that you were right, and then put in $500, make sure that was right, and wait a little bit, kind of spread out dollar cost average into this market so that you don't get caught in some sort of situation. So it doesn't matter how much you believe in it or whatever. Gradually in, gradually out of market. That's really the way you want to be doing it. So yeah, very exciting times. We're seeing a lot of action. I don't think there's anything new here. I think that one thing I'll do next week, I didn't have time today, but I'll put together one of those kind of PowerPoint presentations. I think it's important to go through some of the themes that we saw in last year's altcoin runs. And obviously I did some presentations on this about the psychology and the markets of it, but I think it's also really important to look at the trends. What are some of the things to look at, right? One thing I can think, it's off the top of my head, the cheapest coins pump the biggest, right? That's if that could become a very, very interesting theme that may repeat itself, stuff like that. So we'll keep an eye on this, but overall, it's less about the gains and the coins. That's what everyone wants and everyone to talk about. But what you really want to be focusing on is the strategy, right? How do you execute the orders? How do you have an exit plan? How are you getting in and out of the market? Because that's how you make and protect your money much more than which coins you pick. Coins you pick are going to take care of themselves in a bull market. Don't worry about that. It's the execution that is how you actually lock in profits. So let's talk a little bit about some what I would consider interesting and bullish news. Pantera Capital, I believe they're based out here. I've met a few of those guys, off and on. One of the most successful crypto hedge funds. It's really just I wouldn't say a hedge fund because they don't really hedge. It's more like a crypto fund. They've had astronomical gains, like 50,000 plus gains, I believe. A lot of that because of early ICO investments. So it's disproportionate in terms of that. But they put out a newsletter, and they've killer newsletters. And the one they put out, I believe it was yesterday, signaled that, hey, this is the bottom, And there's going to be, I believe they call it a wall of money that's coming, that's going to just push this price up like crazy, push the whole market up. There's just so much money coming in that there's no way that that it's going to just overpower any sort of technical downside that we may see. That the demand curve is just so huge that this market needs to get 50x bigger before we see like a true supply and demand situation in place. Now, obviously, this is only Bitcoin, but the same could be said for any sort of crypto index. So it's a very bullish sign, and more importantly, they've only made, I think, two or three calls over their entire since 2014 about like, hey, this is the bottom or this is the top or whatever it may be. So for them to come out and say that is very, very important, at least in the venture world, right? So when you look at the big picture, realize, yes, this is bullish news, but it's in its own bubble, right? The thing is, though, that bubble has billions and billions and billions of dollars in it that look to each other for decisions, right? That's kind of how the venture capital world works. Private equity to a certain extent, but definitely venture capital. And then you've got the whole other world, which is retail investors, institutional investors to a certain extent, bankers, investment banks, things like that. But the VC world is still huge. And Pantera is obviously one of the leaders and thought leaders, and just one of the, like they put a lot of most money in this space. And so people look to them. It's kind of like the Andreessen Horowitz for crypto. Andreessen Horowitz being one of the top VC investment companies just in venture capital, in tech for many reasons, biotech, things like that. So it's good. I mean, I don't like to use the word hopeful, but it definitely instills a feeling of, man, this actually is the real deal. This may be a really solid floor for us. Obviously, nothing is set in stone. Time is the true barometer of what's real or what ends up being true. But man, perception becomes reality in this market, and the more perception there is, the better. Other piece of news: Tim Draper, actually, buddy Chris Dunn. Shout out to Chris Dunn, great guy. He was down there interviewing Tim Draper, which I think it'll come out next week. So I'm excited to hear that. And Tim Draper, he's kind of famous. He became famous. Obviously, he made billions of dollars as a venture capitalist out here in Silicon Valley. And he bought all of the Bitcoin when the FBI seized it from the Silk Road, which was a dark web site. I'm sure many of you know what that was. Back in 2013, he bought that. He bought thousands and thousands of Bitcoins from the FBI. And he famously came out and said that it's going to be 10,000 by the end of 2017. And so obviously, it hit 10,000 November, I think. And so everyone was like, "Oh man, you predicted it perfectly. What's the next thing?" And yesterday he had a big, whatever you want to call it, event where he said that Bitcoin's going to reach 250,000 by 2022. All right, so what's that? 3.5 years, 3.5 years, give or take. And so I think that I think that this is it's more kind of fun and than anything else. I rarely listen to anyone when they give price predictions unless they have like really good information or insider information for the most part. But I do think that there's the idea of kind of self-fulfilling prophecies where enough people do believe in the vision, it does become true, right? The demand curve does get big enough. The 250,000 does end up happening. And for this, for a guy like Tim Draper, he did it once. If he does it again, he's the kind of guy who's going to get on CNBC. I mean, he was on CNBC when when Coinbase did their first like index fund announcement, like the fake Ripple thing. He was there and he's like, "Oh, we're going to give a big announcement." So this is one of those things, like it creates what some people would say is an artificial demand, right? This isn't based on usage. It's not based on anything. It's based on speculation and hype. But that's what this whole thing has been based on to begin with. And if you get to a critical mass with anything, with any scarce resource, it becomes almost too big to fail. It becomes anti-fragile. That's what the Lindy effect is all about. And you can impact how that works. So it's really interesting, the timing of all this, how we're seeing a lot of this bullish news come out right at this technical moment when we really need bullish news to come out. And then we're also faced with, the kind of traditional FUD that comes out here and there. So overall, it's just good to see this kind of thing. I think that it is what it is. I also, survivorship bias is a very, very powerful force, meaning there's 15,000 people probably who have made price predictions. And Tim Draper was one of the few that was very right, very early, in many ways. And so because he survived out of those 15,000, he was the one that was right. He now becomes he gets disproportionate levels of authority. It does not necessarily mean that future price predictions will match, right? It just means that that's what survivorship bias is. That's why there's a lot of cognitive bias built into that. So take it for a grain of salt. Do you see? So I know that there's a lot going on there, but what I'm saying is that when you push all this big demand side hype, but it's done by people that are in bubbles that have huge deep pockets, it's very different than when you have demand side hype with people that are retail investors that may be putting in like $5,000 into altcoins. That ends up breeding things like scams and whatever else. This sort of thing ends up breeding big venture capitalists putting in tens, 20, 30 million of dollars into the ecosystem, which actually does change the entire shape of the curve. And that's why this is a big deal. And we just haven't seen a lot of this sort of thing coordinated and from big VC names in a long time. So overall, good news. Now, I put this tweet up. I would encourage you guys I would say half the tweets I put up are really data for you guys to check out, for me to check out, for everyone to check out. This tweet I put out this morning: which coin do you think will have the biggest percentage gains in the next 6 months? Comment below. And so, obviously there's hundreds and hundreds of comments, so I haven't refreshed this, but I would go through this. And I think it's not necessarily that there's going to be any correlation between what gets the most comments or what gets the most likes or whatever. I think that, you could go back and look at this exact same, like a lot of tweets from 2017 and see how a lot of those didn't end up becoming fulfilled prophecies. But I think it's really important to get a sense of how excited people are right now, what people are looking at, compare it to what's going on in the charts, but also, most importantly, ask yourself, how many people are commenting because they own something and they want it to go up, versus how many people see a coin and if it goes up, they're going to dump in a huge amount of money into it. It's a very subtle difference. But you look at something like, obviously Wanchain is like one of the biggest. I think Wanchain, it was one of the most commented. Obviously OMG, Omise Go, Cardano, Icon, all these VeChain. The question is, do these people already own a lot of Wanchain? Do they already own a lot of Omise Go? Or are they tomorrow going to go take out a mortgage on their house and go buy more? And I don't know. But what I can tell you is that one of the subtleties of altcoin runs, when you want the things that go 50x, is that it rarely happens with coins when you're like, okay, well, I've got mine, and now I just expect everybody else to buy it. It happens on the coins when you are the one who is like, I need to buy that coin. Or you're around people, they're like, I am actually going to buy that. It's not like I want everyone else to buy it. And it's a weird way to look at it, but I would really encourage everybody to think about it that way. What's a coin that if you buy some, you're like foaming at the mouth to buy more, not, okay, I'm going to buy some and then I want the hype or I want everyone else to take care of the rest. I want the market to make me rich, because the market never does. Like, you got to do it. So that's just how I look at this. But I do think that the wisdom of the crowds, especially in a hypey speculative market like crypto is and probably will be for the foreseeable future, it's always good to get that kind of data. So with that, great stuff, exciting times. Keep an eye on things over the weekend. I think that, we've been talking this week how the next week and a half is going to be a big deal. That's obviously happened thus far. We still have, in the United States at least, 4 days for people to file their taxes, to actually pay the taxes. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a great time, and ready to rock it out. All right, guys, I hope you have a phenomenal weekend. Banana Town, crushing it. I will see you on Monday. All right, peace out.